Hi everyone, trust you all are doing well and welcome to another lesson. And if you're new, welcome to the channel. Right, so I've created an input field right here, and if we type something, it updates accordingly. Now, the reason for this is I want to explain how Livewire works in an oversimplified manner. And the reason for that is because the coming lessons we're going to be delving a little bit deeper into Livewire and some concepts. And if we understand more or less how it works, then we can understand those concepts a little bit better, right? To understand the magic, right? So now in this case, I'm just going to show you the code editor and to show you what I've done, all right? So let me quickly do that. Right, so in Visual Studio Code, I just added an input field, and I used the ajax input field, and I did a wire model, and I bind it to our first name. All right, so we got our state right here, our first name. All right, and then we just bind it to that. So whenever the first name state changes, it updated that accordingly. All right, so in this case, I'm going to use my graphic design tool in order to kind of explain the process to you. All right, so this is obviously oversimplified. Let me just make this a little bit bigger, just zoom in here. All right. Now, the process of Livewire works as follows. A Livewire components are server rendered because you must understand, if you work in PHP, PHP is a server-side language. JavaScript is a client-side language, okay, so front end, okay. Now, a Livewire component, Livewire as it is actually a JavaScript framework, but you as a developer don't have to type in any JavaScript. You can just continue with your normal PHP language, all right. So, now, when you create your component, right, so we got our div right there in this case. All right, so as you can see, we got our div right here. So we got our user details, and I'm referring to this div right here. So this div is now rendered by the server, all right? So it means it's SEO friendly, all good to go. All right, so this is the component right here that is server-side rendered, all right? So that's the first thing, okay? So that gets sent to the client's computer. All right, so this div, original div with all the content inside there, will get sent to the client's PC, and it will actually render right there. All right. So now that div gets sent right here. Now it's displaying on the user's PC. It's displaying all the information that's coming from the server. All right. Now the thing is the state change. Okay. Let me just show you the state again. So if we go to our user details right here, we're going to change the state of first name. So let's do that. So the current state is Jenna, and we want to change the state to maybe Jenna's. Okay, let's do that. All right, so the state changed to S. As you can see, now it will automatically re-render the component. But you will think now it's a whole lot of magic happening. All right, there is, but I will show you in a second why. So basically, whenever the state change, it will automatically re-render the view. All right, the view right here. The view right here. This will get automatically re-rendered. All right, but let me show you the process. So what we have done, we changed the state. So we made an AJAX request to the server. All right, the server is like, okay, what must change? The server changed the Jenna's to Jenna's. It re-renders the component, and you will send it back to the user's PC, and it re-renders it right there. Okay, but this is an oversimplified explanation, but I will show you the reason for the madness. All right, so let's go back to the browser, and I will show you the process. So in this case, let me just change it back to Jenna. All right, and let me open our developer tools. So you press S12. Now in this case, we're going to go to the network, all right, and we're just going to highlight our AJAX request right there. All right, let's change that to Jenna's. Now, as you can see, Livewire will send an ajax request to the server. All right, let me just show you the request. Make this a little bit bigger for you guys. Zoom in a little bit more. Now, as you can see, it will show you this is what the original state is, all right, Jenna, and this what it needs to be updated to. So there comes the updates. It needs to update with the first name, and the value needs to be Jenna's. All right, so what will happen now? The server does what it do, and it will create a response. And the response is basically, it re-renders that whole div, that whole component. Let me just show you. Let me just make this a little bit bigger. All right. It re-renders that whole component. And as you can see right here, you will see the Jenna's Jones right there. So basically how Livewire works is that whole div as it is gets re-rendered on the server side, and it will actually just change the necessary things, and it will send them to the front end. All right. But now how does it change like this automatically? Now, this gets done with Livewire's JavaScript. All right. So basically, the server gets the information. All right. It sends the request. It will look JavaScript on Livewire JavaScript. Will look at what changed between the two divs. All right. And we'll say, okay, this one had Jenna. All right. This one right here is got the new Jenna. And this one has got a Jenna with an S, and it will mutate the DOM or update the DOM to change it to an S with JavaScript. But now you might find out where did the JavaScript come from. Let me show you. When we install our Livewire component, we make use of the script tags. All right. So Livewire does its magic with JavaScript. Remember, like I said in the beginning, Livewire is a JavaScript framework. Stop. Like Vue.js, React.js, or whatever, or Angular, it's still a JavaScript framework, but you just do all your coding in native PHP. Right? So that's the only difference. Right? So when you create your things, you create them in PHP, but Livewire uses its magic to do the necessary changes with JavaScript on the front end. All right, so I'm quickly going to go through that again. So Livewire, when you create the component, it renders the initial server-side component. It sends it to the client's PC. It displays on the user's PC right there the information. And if any of the state changes, it sends an AJAX request to the server. All right, the server says, okay, what was the request? And it's going to create a response. It re-renders this request. It sends it to Livewire in the front end, and it used JavaScript in the DOM to see what was the changes between the two, and it updates the DOM accordingly. All right, so that's an oversimplified explanation of how the process works. There's obviously a little bit more. All right, you will hear words like it's hydrated, it dehydrated, it re-renders the views, but this is just an oversimplified explanation. All right, during the process right here, it packages the request, whatever this might happen right here, it packages it. All right, then it hydrates the class. Hydrating just meaning fill the class with the necessary data. Then it re-renders the view. Then it dehydrates the class and send the response with the new data from the server. Then Livewire will basically update the DOM with JavaScript. Okay, and compare the two responses and update the original to the changed data. All right, that's kind of the process right there. Right, so I was thinking what was the best way. This is kind of my visual representation of the whole thing. Right, we're obviously still going to get to the how does this all work and what this is, to binding, data binding. We're still going to get to that part, but I just wanted to show you the whole process of how Livewire actually works. So as you can see, with every stroke right here, it makes requests to the server and it updates the DOM accordingly. All right, and this is obviously all done with JavaScript on the front end, but we don't have to type in anything JavaScript related. It's all done with Livewire Magic. But now the thing is, Livewire's default method, debounce method, is 150 milliseconds. All right, when it does request, but we're still going to get to that part where we can actually define the time limit and stuff like that as well. But don't worry about that for now, about the request. There's so many requests, we can actually change it as we go along. Right, so that's just an oversimplified explanation. And yes, in the next one, we're going to be working with the actions. And yes, thank you guys for watching. And if you feel like this video was helpful, please give it a like. If you feel like it was not helpful, please give it a dislike. And yes, for feedback, negative or positive, are always appreciated. Thank you guys, and see you in the next one. Goodbye.